Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. How are we? I'm good. Thanks for asking. I'm your resident active advocate. And today, I would like to present an introduction to my new series rather than immediately starting on the series itself. Because, backstory. Alright, so initially, I went into this series thinking, okay, I'll start with the AODA and then read the IASR. I will explain what both of those are, but give me a sec. Whereas my kind, loving, and intelligent advisor, whom I love, advised me to basically do the reverse. She said that the IASR is more about scaffolding for the AODA. Again, I will explain what both of those things are in a sec. So I will actually be starting with what you could kind of consider a subsidiary document, rather than doing, as I did in my last series, a thing like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission first, which is the big guy, and then doing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples second, which is sort of the subsidiary or document within a document. It's the scaffold, the supporting mechanism. Instead of doing it in that order, I'm going to do it in the reverse order. So the IASR is the one I will be tackling first. It stands for the Integration of Accessibility Standards Regulations. All right. And then I'll be doing the big guy, the AODA, the Access for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. All right. If you do not live in Ontario, I do live in Ontario, but if you do not live in Ontario, this might still interest you in that it displays how progress can be made in favor of people with disabilities. We are back in my wheelhouse. This is where I started because, name a major organ and I'll tell you what's wrong with mine. Well, wrong in quotation marks, blah, 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 right? But yeah, this is my wheelhouse much more than Indigenous issues are. I had to get a lot of advice on how to conduct all of that, and I intend to go back to it at some point because I would like to, maybe. I have to think about this, and I also have to consult with other people who are actually part of the communities. I wouldn't mind talking about, the Indian Act, which is still legal in Canada. Wouldn't mind talking about that and pulling it to shreds. But as it stands at the moment, I do not have the expertise. And I also want to focus on something on which I do have slightly more expertise. So the IASR and the AODA each outline 5 different standards in which Ontario, between the years of 2005, which is when the AODA was implemented, and the year 2025, so 3 years from now, in which Ontario seeks to advance or perfect its accessibility standards. Okay, so those 5 different areas are information and technology, transportation, employment, outdoor and public space access, and customer service. That was it. Okay, so those are the big 5, because the rest of accessibility, except I would argue that education should be put in there as well. That's my argument, but the rest of accessibility kind of boils down more to a mezzo or a micro level, whereas those big 5 are more on the macro scale. They're big things that we can do things about. And I'm not going to say that things have not been done since 2005. Okay? We have seen advancements in Ontario. If you have ever, or even outside of Ontario, but if you have ever stopped at a street light where it goes bing, 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 as a sound for people with visual impairment or people who are fully blind who might not know where the lights are at, kind of thing. I don't mean in terms of position, I mean in terms of how long the red is going to last, that kind of thing. If you've ever heard one of those, or if you've ever seen the literal curb cut effect, but I'll talk about what conceptually the curb cut effect is later on. But when people, or not people, but construction, they kind of dip the curb and make it more streamlined instead of a 90-degree angle. That's usually for the use of wheelchair users. And that was implemented in Ontario courtesy of the AODA. Things like that, okay? And they're small things that you might not even think about. Braille on signs in public places, brighter lights in public spaces, access to elevators and escalators. That's the big one. And that's not just for non-disabled people either. That is, especially in the case of wheelchair users, elevators are pretty much essential. So I'm not going to say that the AODA necessarily is responsible for all of these advancements, but in terms of retrofitting with these kinds of advancements, then yes, it is, usually. At least after the year 2005. However, that being said, I really don't think, and I'm not the only one in this camp, that enough has been done, and I don't think that enough can be done by 2025 to make Ontario, as the politicians put it, fully accessible. Because I would like you to define fully accessible for me. To me, fully accessible means I can, because I'm not a wheelchair user, I can use this phrase, on my own 2 feet, leave my house and get to where I need to go and get around physically where I need to go and be able to know where everything is and see where everything's at, because I'm not fully blind either, I'm visually impaired. So transportation and navigation can be difficult for me personally, okay? Those are 2 of my kind of iffy zones. So I don't tend to venture out alone very much. But when I do, it's a matter of getting to know where I am and getting to know where all the different things in where I am are at. Going to a new public place. University was an interesting one. I got lost a number of times. High school was worse for that, though, I have to say, because it was an older building. But anyway, this is me yammering. But, okay, basically the way in which the AODA, the Access for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, is meant to be applied is outlined in the IASR, okay? So I will be reading the IASR before I read the AODA, okay? These things are freaking mammoths. We're going to be here for quite a while on this series. Honestly, between the 2 of them, I would estimate that this thing is probably going to go into the new year. If I do 5 per day, which is my usual custom, and yes, these things are numbered. But we will see how I want to break this thing down, because the IASR alone has 86 different points in it. So do the math, that is over 40 days that we're going to be here. I'm okay with that. Y'all okay with that? And that's just for one document. It's just over a month, really. But yeah, like I say, probably till the new year that this series will take us. Because the IASR and the AODA, they're both very important to understand. As I say, even if you don't live in Ontario, because you can have access, pejoratively, to what can be done if we put our minds to it and if the government gives a flying fleep. Yes, she smiles at the screen. Anyway, so I will see all of you tomorrow to begin this series. It's going to be fun. Yay. I hope. It's going to be interesting anyway, and it might piss me off at points. We'll see when we get there. All right. Have a lovely, wonderful day, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye. Mwah.